Hi there, Prairie Plant Girl here. Today I want to talk about the brassicas that I'm going to be growing in my 2023 gardening season. What I'm going to mostly focus on here are the kind of larger brassicas like your cauliflower, broccoli, and cabbage. I'll touch briefly on my Brussels sprouts. They're not something I've really done a great job of growing yet so far, so anything I do with them is mainly just experimenting. I find it difficult in my climate. At least that's the excuse I'm making for getting the Brussels sprouts going through the whole season. I used to find these large headed brassicas a real challenge in my short season garden. Our seasons go quite quickly from very cold to quite hot, and then to cold again. And in just a few short weeks, our climate changes drastically here. We don't have those long shoulder seasons that some areas do. I have about 110 frost-free days of growing time, and a lot of that time the temperatures are quite warm, over 20 Celsius, quite often up close to 30. And so we don't have a lot of that prime weather for brassicas. The good news is you can grow them a little bit earlier. You don't need to wait for your last frost. They can handle, especially with a little bit of protection, being put out earlier, and that can help us through. But we don't have a great deal of time where it's still even safe with that. So when do I start my brassicas? I'll start a few like cabbage and Brussels sprouts about the middle of March. And then the beginning of April is when I'll get going most of my starts for my cabbage and my broccoli and my cauliflower. I usually stagger some planting, so I'll plant a few, and then a couple weeks later I'll plant a few more plants, and I'm just planting them in small trays so they're easy to take out, pop out, move as they start to mature and get a few leaves, because I'll start them indoors. They need a warmer temperature to germinate, but then after that they can go out into temperatures where they're getting, if they have protection, they get a little bit of light frost at night. So you can put them out. I could be putting them out in my greenhouse or into a cold frame or something in April when we're still getting frost at night, or May, and they'll be all right. But it's nice then to have something they're in that's small. And like I said, I'll just be planting a few of each variety at a time. So something small like this to have the different successions, not all in the same tray, works well for me. So this is a good little tray for planting a few varieties at a time. And you can easily take it out, and it's an all-in-one unit that I've purchased, and has a little dome in that for when you're getting them germinated, or if you want to give them a little extra protection. Another tray that I like is something like this. You can see they're just a little bit deeper and a little bit wider. So hopefully you can see that difference. So they're about the same size, but this tray only has 6 cells and this tray has 8. And you can hopefully see the height difference there of the two trays. So this just gives a little bit more root space. You can hold your brassicas for a little while, and they can get to have quite a good size root, and you don't want to be stunting those roots. They don't want to get root bound. That can really damage their growth if they get too tight in the root zone. You don't want to hold them for too long, but you can for a little while and then plant them out later. So that's just the kind of trays that I like to start them with. Now, if I was using a tray like this, I would put it in something like this to start, or in your standard 10-20 tray, and I'd have a lot of different ones, but then I can easily grab this one and take it out to the garden or the greenhouse, wherever it's going with me, and move it around without taking more immature plants or other varieties that I don't want out yet. So that's why I like these smaller trays for something like that, instead of like a 72 count or something. I do have a video on growing cauliflower and tips for growing cauliflower, and those tips will prove true for most of your like your cabbage and your broccoli as well. So I'll leave a link for that so you can check that out, because I do think it could be a lot of help for you if you've had trouble with your cauliflowers, your broccolis, your cabbages in the past. So I have my little container here of the different varieties that I'm going to be growing. So let's start with my cauliflower. I was really hoping to grow more graffiti this year, and I only have maybe half a dozen seeds, and I could not find graffiti cauliflower anywhere. So what graffiti cauliflower is it's a purple cauliflower. I really, really like it. The color doesn't change the flavor really, but it seemed to be less susceptible to the changes in the temperature and the hot temperatures. And I don't know if that's really true. That's just what it seemed like to me in my garden. And people say that it's not as attractive to the cabbage moths and cabbage loopers. Now I keep mine netted, so that's not something I've really had to worry about. But I could not find the graffiti at all anywhere. Another colored cauliflower that I really like is cheddar. And now this is kind of an orange yellow kind of head of cauliflower. Again, it doesn't really change the flavor, though I would say if out of the graffiti and the cheddar, if there is a slight difference in the flavor off of your standard very white, the typical kind of cauliflower you'd get around here in the grocery stores, I'd say the cheddar does have a little bit different flavor, but it's just more of a richer flavor to me, if that makes sense. And maybe it's just my eyes playing tricks with the kind of orange coloring. I don't know. But it's not a huge difference, and even my family, who is extremely fussy on how things taste and how they should taste, you know, they say they still like the cheddar and they'll still eat that cooked or raw. So that's always a good thing for me. So the cheddar again is a little bit less prone to being damaged by heat and sun shining on the heads if you don't get it wrapped. And it's also supposed to be a little bit less susceptible to the pests. Though again, the pests, I haven't had a big test of that with the netting I use. It keeps out the loopers and the moths and things. So I also have Freedom cauliflower, and I actually have a couple of packs of it because I really like it. This is a good white variety for me. They're a 65-day maturity, so they mature well in my season. I can get some in successions, and I can usually get a couple of growth, a couple of rounds of these going and harvested throughout the year. They have a really nice size head. This variety has self-wrapping leaves, and with some varieties I find that they say that it doesn't really mean a lot, but with the Freedom it does seem to wrap the head. I still tend to kind of pull the leaves together when the heads get really big, just to make sure that they're covered up well, you know, but they have a little less hassle. If you don't know what wrapping the heads is, it's just to keep the sun and the heat off the head of cauliflower. It can really affect the flavor and how tight the head develops. And so you need to keep the sun off of the head or the flower part of the cauliflower when it's developing. And that's why the cheddar and the and graffiti can be good, because they don't need that as much. I still do like to do it, but the Freedom, it will self-wrap and it does do a pretty good job of it. So it's just one less thing to have to be worried about. This is also a nice dense cauliflower. These heads grow really tight together, and they seem, for me anyways, to stay quite dense, whereas some, as soon as the heat hits them, they'll start to open up, and that changes the flavor and the quality, the texture. Whereas the Freedom, I think, just works better through the heat compared to some of the other white varieties that I've had, and just holds its head better. Another cauliflower that I will plant, but I won't plant a lot of, is the early snowball. I like to grow early snowball because it is a fast maturing variety. So I can get these in and pretty early. They're not as susceptible to the cold as other varieties. And I just find that they do quite well in those very, in the cooler weather. So when you can get a few in that for that little bit cooler weather, they can do well for that, and they mature very quickly. Minuteman is a new one. This is a 47-day variety, and it would be nice because the snowball, it matures quickly, it grows fairly well, but I don't know, there's something about the texture of it I just don't love. So I thought, oh, maybe the Minuteman would be one that could replace that. And with that fast maturity, that's always a bonus in my climate. So Minuteman, Freedom, Snowball, Cauliflower, Cheddar, and a few Graffiti. That's the cauliflower I'll be growing in 2023. So how about the broccoli? I'll probably sow these every 3 to 4 weeks, because broccoli will last a lot longer than cauliflower. Once a head of cauliflower matures and you cut it off, that plant usually is done. So they're usually best just to pull out or to take the leaves and use them for greens. But broccoli, you can cut off that main head that forms, the large main head that forms, and it'll throw up several side shoots. And I find often I can cut those side shoots and get another flush of even smaller side shoots. So they go from, you know, a good size head to kind of a much smaller head to even smaller. But you still get several harvests off each plant, and that's the bonus with broccoli to me. So I don't need to do as many succession plantings with them, but I do usually have a few backup plants just in case I need them. The broccoli that I will be growing is Gypsy. Now, broccoli, to me, a lot of them seem very similar when you're growing them, and I always seem to kind of get them mixed up. But if I recall, Gypsy is one of the ones that I do prefer. When it comes right down to it, they just have a nice size head. They have a nice bright color to them, and a good flavor. They don't get that same bitterness that some broccoli can, and they don't get that kind of dried out texture that some broccoli can. It's a 62-day maturity. Now I have Green Magic, and Green Magic is, again, it's one of those, it's a really nice fast maturing one. It has, you know, a good head. The Arcadia is 69 days, and this has a kind of a blue tinge to the broccoli head or the flower. That's the part that you eat. And I really like this one. If you can get it, like, you can't leave it to get past maturity. So you really have to watch those heads, because, you know, you always want the biggest head you can get off of it. But as soon as it starts to turn or separate at all, you need to cut it, and hopefully the day before that happens. And that's how you'll get the best flavor out of it. But they do have really nice size heads, and I really do like the flavor of these as long as you catch them before they go past. So the Imperial is a broccoli that I wouldn't say it's my favorite broccoli. It is still a good broccoli, and it seems to grow well in my climate. And the thing with Imperial is it's a broccoli that you can cut and you can keep in your refrigerator just wrapped in a damp piece of towel for quite a while. And it usually lasts longer and stays nicer after it's been cut than some of the other types that I grow. So it's nice that way. And it also is a good one for cutting and growing to freeze. So I will freeze any of these, but there's some that just seem to work better when you blanch them and freeze them than others. Some of them just seem to not cook up in the same way, but the Imperial is one that works well for that. So those are my broccoli picks, and those are what will be going in my garden this year. So I have several types of cabbage here, and I've grown a lot of cabbage, a lot of varieties of cabbage in the past. And I have to say, I think I'm going to be cutting out some of the varieties that I grow this year. So one that I really liked, I tried for the first time last year, was this Katarina. And if you're just growing cabbage just for a nice size, small family size head of cabbage that matures quickly, it holds well, the Katarina was a really good cabbage for me. Like I said, it was my first time doing it. It's 45 to 50 days. And all the days of the brassicas are after you transplant them out. That's not from when you start them inside. And yeah, it's just a nice small head of cabbage. Like they say, you can plant these like a foot apart. And if you're growing cabbage, you know that most cabbage needs a good 18 to 24 inches. Some need even more than that. So one that can fit into a small space like that in my garden is always one that I'm going to want to have, like if it has the good flavor, especially like this does. So it's a nice tight head, has good flavor, nice and crisp. It grew well for me, and it didn't take up a ton of space, and it grew quickly. One that I've grown quite a bit over the years, for the last few years, just trying to, I want to like this cabbage so bad, but I just don't, is the Mammoth Red Rock. It's a huge, huge cabbage. It takes a really long time to mature. What is it? It's 100 days. So when you think that my growing season for cabbage is probably only maybe 130 days if I'm lucky, and that's counting outside of my frost-free time. That's a lot of time, and it takes up a huge amount of space. Like, these are big, like they say, they're mammoth. They're huge cabbage, and they take up a lot of space, and that's just more space than I want to give. And oftentimes it just doesn't mature for me. It rots out, or it gets sun scalded and just gets nasty. I just have not had good luck with it, so it's one that I'm just not going to be growing anymore. A couple that I do like that are just a little bit larger but not huge are the Stonehead and the Gunma. The Stonehead is another fast growing one. This says it's about 50 days to maturity, and the Gunma is a little bit longer. It takes 83 days, but it does produce a nice size cabbage. The Gunma doesn't have a core to it, and it's one that I've used in the past to use for things like cabbage rolls. I really like the way it grows and the way the leaves come off, and it worked really well for me for that. So it's worth it for me to grow this for the 83 to, you know, possibly 100 days, because you remember these are just kind of estimates of how many sunshine hours you're going to get in a day, these days to maturity. So it's worth it to me to give it that time to be able to get a good size head of cabbage that isn't just going to tear and rip. It's going to have good leaves that are good sized leaves, not all full of core in the middle. You can use a good part of it and make cabbage rolls. To me, that's worth it. I can't remember. This is Copenhagen Market, and I just cannot remember how this one did for me last year. I believe last year is the first year I grew it. It says it's a 3 to 4 pound with large round heads, and this takes 65 days to maturity. So I'll probably grow it again because I just don't remember. So either it was just completely unremarkable, or I've just forgotten what it was like. But the Copenhagen Market, I'll grow this again, try it again, and hopefully I'll be able to report back to you with more information about it once I once I grow it again and refresh my memory. I have this Taiwan cabbage. This is a nice cabbage. I've grown it for a few years. It doesn't always grow well for me, but I usually plant a few seeds. So I'll grow them again. It's a good one for using for like salads and slaws and things. So let me see, what does it say for the maturity? It's 73 days to maturity. It has a little bit different texture to the leaves, and it's just a nice cabbage for just something different, you know, than your kind of standard big head cabbage. So that's the cabbages that I'm growing. Like I said, that Mammoth Red Rock, I really wanted to like it. If you have a suggestion for a short kind of warmish season that's a red cabbage, I'd really like to hear it, because that's why I had picked that Mammoth Red Rock. And it seems like a lot of the red ones they take a long time to mature. So maybe someone has a good suggestion for me. Put it in the comments. I'd love to hear it. My Brussels sprouts, I don't know what to say. I'm just not, I've only gotten a few meager Brussels sprouts after, I think, 2 or 3 years now of trying to grow Brussels sprouts. I don't think it's the varieties. These varieties are grown by a lot of short season gardeners in climates that are similar to mine. They do seem to do better out on the East Coast, where the weather is cooler and more rainy, and I don't know if that makes a difference for them. But I have Jade Cross and Long Island. These are both around 100-day maturity, but I haven't been able to keep them. I find a lot of trouble with the flea beetles on these, and I have trouble keeping them netted because they grow taller, and I want to have somewhere where I can have them staked. And I just haven't netted them well enough, I guess, and taken care of them in the same way that I do some of my other brassicas. And maybe that's the problem that I have with them. But I just have not had good luck. I'm going to continue to grow a couple plants, and hopefully one year I figure it out and I can let you know what I figured out with these suckers. But Brussels sprouts, Jade Cross and Long Island, those are the varieties I'll be growing. I'm not going to bother investing in a lot of other varieties because these two should be varieties that can work in my climate, if anything can work in my climate. So I'll just keep trying with them, and I think it's just user error on my part for the most part here, but that's my brassicas, or my large brassicas anyways. I'll have pak choi and other things that I'll be growing as well, but those are kind of those big brassicas that are fun to grow and give you a little bit more of a bang for your harvest, and those are the ones that I wanted to share with you today. Thanks for watching. I hope you're getting ready for your gardening season and getting as excited as I am to get seeds started. We have, a little bit to wait yet, but it's coming, it's coming. So we'll see you in the next one. Bye.